So let's get into something else because we were talking about children and what's up with this word children. Why would you rather use offspring than the word children? Monarch?
Well, without the definition pulled up, children are the legalese term that they use in the family courts and other courts in describing that in which they have jurisdiction over, along with mother and father or parents. When you address offspring as children in the legal world, you're talking right into their narrative and into their legalese. You're not distinct, and you're not distinguishing your offspring as what they are.
Okay, well, I actually do have the definition of children pulled up, and Webster's 1828 just said plural of child. So, child is a son or a daughter, a male or a female descendant. See, it's not a masculine or feminine descendant. Okay, so a male or a female is an animal. It's a male animal or a female animal of a male sex or a female sex. It's the way to classify them, or to classify plants or different things of that nature, anything biological. Masculine and feminine are only applied to man and woman. That's it. In the first degree, the immediate uh, progeny of parents applied to the human race. See, it's not applied to man or woman, it's just applied to the human race. And of course, that's why they believe that they have jurisdiction, is because if you look at it, man and woman, or the humans are, they own man and woman. Okay, so no, man and woman own humans. I'm sorry, I got some brain fog tonight.
So when CPS or DSS gets involved, then you're saying that the word or the term that they use is what? Like on their paperwork.
It's always child, children, mother, and father. Like they'll never use mom, dad. Mom and dad is a common law Anglo-Saxon word. Mother and
Yes.
father it comes from Latin.
In fact, interesting point on that. In the social studies, as they call it, which is the write-ups of CPS for that they file with their petition for the magistrate to evaluate. In there, they do a write-up of your visitation, your interactions with your offspring, or as they see it, with your children. And in fact, I noticed something interesting in one of mine after a 326 hearing, which is a termination of parental rights. A lot of kicker words there, but when it describes my interactions with my offspring, they actually redacted the word father, because once it was written up prior to the hearing, and then after the hearing, they no longer considered me father. And so they actually had to redact father when they described me.
Well, what did they consider you after the hearing?
Right.
I'm not sure. That's an interesting question,
Yeah.
because the termination of parental rights, now, parental rights are your decision-making power in the legal society over their health and educational needs. In fact, another interesting point, it never addresses spiritual needs or religious needs, any of those things, because they know they have no jurisdiction. They can't say your kid's no longer a Christian or a Jew or whatever. Um, so I thought that was interesting too.
Well, I mean, honestly, like you start thinking about it like that. Like, let's just say they did this to somebody who is Amish, right? They'd be taking them out of the Amish community because the Amish are their own government, right? They're self-governing. Yeah, so
Yep,
it's like, they are really, in a way, controlling the religion by forcing them to participate in the state, because the
yep,
state in and of itself is a religion, and that's why It's not going to have some type of religious belief attached to it because they already have the religious belief so ingrained they don't need to talk about it.
Yeah, and when you're in the system, whether you're a child or a mother or father or adoptive mother or father, you are held account to the state heavier in more ways than I can even describe. Probably equivalent to somebody on probation or on parole.
Yeah, because the state's
definitely.
looking at it as, hey, we're letting you borrow our property. If
Yep.
we wish to access our property, get to our property, see where our property's staying. See, the state looks at children a lot like property. They don't look at children as offspring. They don't look at something that was sacredly created. Because with the state, there is no God. The state is God. The state gets you to believe it's God in a very subtle, subconscious, almost unconscious way. So they're not going to recognize any type of authority from the creator. It's just not going to happen. Um, well, it's not that man and woman within the state won't recognize it. It's that the state itself, because the state itself is just a fictional entity. Okay, so hey, Monarch, can you take over for just a sec?
Yeah, it's almost like you consider the state as artificial intelligences. I'm trying this analogy out for the first time here, but it's as though it was created by people, and it's as though the reality of man and woman and offspring has never been programmed into it. So it's running off of a code that talks about children, mother, father, and you have to input that data that you are not those things. It's already presuming otherwise.
So when you adopt children, John said earlier that you bestow rights upon your children. How does that work out when you actually adopt children, and then when the state gets involved? I think JC briefly mentioned it, but what whole set of new ramifications are there when that occurs, when DSS or Child Protective Services gets involved with that?
To my understanding, the court does, at least they claim to respect and recognize things like religious preference. So while they're in, say, the short-term or long-term foster care, they are supposed to be brought to their place of worship, if that's the case, and it's supposed to be honored and recognized by the foster parents. But once adoption takes place and they've been adopted, the children are completely separated from any rights that you as man or woman, the biological, have bestowed. Now they're beholden in every way, essentially, to the foster or adoptive parents.
So because when you, and let me see if I got this correctly, because I know a lot of friends of mine who have adopted children. So in some ways, are you saying that kids that are adopted, children that are adopted, offspring that are adopted, that are not, obviously not come from your own body, is it easier for the state to take them away because you've actually received them from the state? Would that be accurate to say?
As far as like from foster parents?
Well, let's say you've gone through the whole adoptive process, and now you've got, a little girl that's yours, and then someone calls the DSS next door because they think you've abused. Because the adoptive process goes through the state, you to be able to, to have that child, whatever. Is it easier for the state to remove that child because you receive that child from the state?
I would say
they recognize it that way.
I would say if you've completed the adoption process, which typically takes maybe a couple years, they will. What is it? They will basically court is adjourned, and they won't have jurisdiction technically. So I would say, if say you adopted some children and a few years go by or whatnot, it would probably be no easier for the state than it would the original parents. So if CPS or DSS were called or reported or somehow brought in, and say the adoptive parents knew how to stand as man or woman, they would probably have an even better chance at getting prevailing through that. So I'd say ultimately, once the adoption process is complete, so-called, they wouldn't be. I don't believe they'd be any easier to lose the children. You know.
I think I'm always amazed how CPS or the DSS, how easy it is to report someone, that they think has done something to the kids, and how quickly DSS gets on top of it and automatically, it seems in my experience, has mostly, held the parents guilty and condemned and removed the kids. I just am amazed how easy it seems to be to report something, even though I don't know what the statistics are, but it would be good to kind of find out of how many, mom and dads are so falsely accused of abuse when it's never really happened at all.
I bet you wouldn't find statistics, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're not going to keep statistics on things like that, and I'll go ahead and tell you why, and here's why. And this is the same reason why CPS jumps back on it so quickly, and that is because it's a business for them. The more children they take, the more money they make. They are literally trafficking children, and because the legislature said it was okay, nobody seems to mind so much, at least not enough people. Kind of getting back, it's about money making. So, okay, so in fact, the legislature knows that it's so unlawful that in basically every single state, I think it is every single state, but I can't verify. I can only certify that one, man. But and this isn't legal advice either. But in every single state that I've seen, I've looked it up, and they have something where they actually give the CPS workers immunity from breaking the law, like civilly or criminally, as long as they're carrying out the functions and duties of what the legislature has instructed them to do. And what that is literally saying in very plain black and white English is that the legislature is very well aware that they're instructing CPS to go and break the law, both civil law and criminal law. And that's when you get people who start thinking that they're above the law, and society allows them to do that by putting up with it. And that's the thing, is that until people actually get together and say, hey, this isn't right, the government's just going to keep doing it. I mean, wrongdoers keep doing wrong until somebody stops them and punishes them.
I know 3 women who are incredibly compassionate, have a great heart, really set out to help children who were in real need, and became very disillusioned with the way it's run. Unfortunately, they had to run away and leave that system when they saw abuse taking place, or they were very limited in what they could do, and their heart really was to help the children. And they did actually remove some children in a very, very abusive situation that was, really harming the kids. So, I have to say, I know that there are some good people out there who, with a real heart, are trying to help. I just think, the whole system it's
the way
corrupt.
They train them.
And the only point I was trying to make is the women that I know that went through the schooling, went through the training with a real heart to help children in real need, finally had to leave the system knowing that they were limited in what they could do to help, and that a lot of kids were being damaged by the system that was, taking away kids that should never have been taken away from their mom, their dad.
Right.
Well, and I mean, I think that's another kind of sad thing because there are a lot of good people who pay to like go to school for criminal justice or go to school to be a social worker, and they really, really want to help, and then they go and they get a job after they've gotten their bachelor's degree or whatever, uh, small college degree that they have. And then they go and they really want to help. They really wish to make a difference. And they go and they sign up for the police force or they sign up for CPS, and, I think the police force has about a 5-year turnover rate. So most people who are on the police force are not police officers for more than 5 years. And I believe with CPS, it's lower. I think it's like 2 to 3 years. And it's basically because
Yeah.
those good people get in there. They try to do a change. They try and, do what they can. And the system just kind of beats them up. And not only that, but the system actually punishes them for trying to do something good for people, which is absolutely insane to me. Unless
Yeah.
it's some type of good propaganda piece, like, you're a police officer and people are really upset with cops in that, community right now. And then you go and, make some Facebook post of you giving a woman, like a woman struggling as a single mother, some food or something. That type of stuff they'll allow as long as it's a good propaganda piece. Getting back to these words, it's like, so how come in law? Because I mean, I'm not going to argue the whole thing with Carl Lentz about using property instead of children, because using property instead of children does tend to work, or it did work for quite a while. I've seen it work. I know other people have seen it work, but offspring is a much stronger word to use. And the reason for this is because your rights to rear your offspring are more sacred than your rights to property. Because unlike your offspring, property is typically made by somebody else. Okay, you're not always making the property that you're using, even if it's yours. And normally with property, it's bought, sold, and traded. More or less, kind of on a regular basis. You think about like your average family home. Even your average family home that was built in the 1950s has probably seen 4 or 5 different families in it. And that's if it were being sold to households and not rented. If it's been rented, then it's very likely that it has seen a number of families go through there, because typically renting families like that don't stay at a house of that nature for more than 1 to 2 years. So, and it also depends on what type of family house it is. So, those are just kind of some things and some character traits, because every word is individualized and it's separate and it all has its own character traits. Like in law, there are no synonymous words. Every word means what it means. It says what it says. So, most people would sit here and say, oh, well, offspring, son, daughter, children, all of that's synonymous. No, it's not. In law, they mean very, very different things. And
Yeah.
if we change our vocabulary, then we'll change the way we see the world. If we change the way we see the world, we'll change the way the world is seen. Like we'll change what's going on in the world. We'll change how people communicate and interact in the world, because it will change the world. It all starts with changing ourselves, with changing the way that we think, with changing the ideas that we share, the ways we express ourselves. It all starts with us. Anyways, with that, let's have a couple of minutes and then we'll open up for hands to be raised if anybody wishes to join in on the conversation.